you know, need your support. We'd love to have your support. And like I said, once you hear what Joe's plan is for the country, like I said, I think you're going to be inspired. I think you're going to be full of hope. But more importantly, you're just going to get to meet a really good human who's been incredibly successful, but he's also very humble, you know. And I heard this story because Josh told me this story a few weeks ago that apparently when Joe was 26, Joe, 26, he was on his combine. He was combining up and down, you know, the Saskatchewan flatland, bringing his crop off, and he said, "I have a dream. Someday I want to be the Prime Minister of Canada." And here he is. We're in the race, and we're in it to win it, right? And the amazing team that we've put together in a short amount of time, you know, like I said, we're having a lot of fun. We really enjoy being together. We really enjoy spending time together. But more importantly, we really enjoy you. We really enjoy meeting you, listening, you know, to your concerns, your fears, you know, all those things. And that's who Joe is, right? We are a reflection of Joe, right? Joe is the leader, and we are a reflection of Joe, right? So with all that said, you know, thank you for having us here. And it's my great honor and pleasure to announce the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and the next Prime Minister, Mr. Joe Bourgault.
Wow, it doesn't get any better than that to be introduced by a superstar. Thank you, Theo. And thank you for all you're doing for the country, all you've done for standing up for freedom. You've been in the fight for freedom here over the last couple of years. And so we can't thank you enough for speaking out against the wrongs that have been done here. So I want to thank everyone for coming. Lights are a little bright here. Thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy lives to come and listen to hear what we have to say here, how we're going to get the country back on the right track again. So thank you all. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a special group of people that helped facilitate the transition of Aaron O'Toole to swift retirement. And we know who did that, and it's our Canadian truckers who did that. And so I can't thank the Canadian truckers enough for everything that they did to help unite the country and to help bring an end to all these ridiculous mandates that we had, preventing people from living lives of freedom and being able to make their own medical decisions. And so thank you to all the truckers here and out there in Canada and for what you've done. I also want to thank all the people that supported the truckers, that went to Ottawa, supporting them, put their time and energy and wealth to assist them. And all the freedom fighters throughout the country, many of them are here tonight, all you freedom fighters that have been standing up for the past 2.5 years. You woke up right away. You knew that there was something rotten in Denmark, and you organized and you worked together to help others to awaken. And so I'm grateful to all of you who have stood up here, many of you here as well, to all the Canadians who have stood up for truth and freedom and justice over the last 2.5 years. Thank you to all of you. So I'm going to give you a little bit about my history, what led to me being here. I'd say number one of the most important things that helped me to develop the character to the point where over the years, I developed a strong moral character. My parents always taught us, always did the right thing. They were always honest with us. They always told us the good, the bad, and the ugly, and in respectful ways. They never lied, never twisted the truth. And by their example, they always stood up for what was right. And so I was tremendously blessed with parents, great parents. And this speaks to the importance of family, which I'm going to talk about, the importance of supporting the family. So as a young guy growing up, I was maybe blessed, I'll say it. At the time, it didn't feel like it. We were a very low-income family, and mom and dad often couldn't pay the bills. And so we had no spending money from our parents because they sometimes had trouble putting food on the table. But mom and dad were both hardworking, tremendous spirit of entrepreneurship, and they instilled that in all my siblings and I. I have an older brother, Jerry Bourgault, a sister, Rita, an older sister, Rita, and a younger brother, Claude. And they instilled in us a work ethic. And so when I was 7, I started working on Saturdays, unloading the dray cars. Many will remember that when everything used to come in the rail cars, and then we'd unload it and haul it to the businesses and to the lumber yards and wherever. So I'd make 25 cents, worked all day and make 25 cents, and that would get me into the theater on that Saturday night. And it also bought a pack of cigarettes. That was one of my first bad habits. I learned to smoke when I was 5 years old. The good news is I quit when I was 20. So, you know, we were employed. I was always employed working for ranchers and farmers, and I loved it. I loved work. And the sense of accomplishment and being able to earn a bit of money, you know, it was great. And so I always appreciated the people who employed me, greatly appreciated having work. When I was 13, I started working with my father, Frank Bourgault. And Dad was a brilliant mechanic. He was a partner, the service manager in Koki and Bourgault Implements. And along with my 3 uncles, Uncle Don was the sales manager, and 2 other uncles in parts, and 1 a silent partner. And so it just happened when I was 13 is when Dad had been strategizing for years. Mom and Dad were both very community oriented. In their spare time, they would be working in the community, helping to build a community, whether it be coaching. I remember Mom was in the Ladies of St. Anne on the church. We were Catholic. Mom was on the Catholic parish board. And Dad was in the Lions Club, and he helped build the first skating rink in 1964-65. I was telling Theo, when I was 5 years old, I was wearing a white pair of girls' skates. That's how I learned to skate on an outdoor rink. And I loved hockey, like Theo. I just wasn't able to rise to his level of excellence. So I played a bit of junior hockey for a couple of years when I was 15, 16, and then realized I wasn't going to make the NHL, so shifted my focus. And further, my father was building, Bourgault Industries was growing, and I was growing with the company as well, ending up in leadership positions. I ended up taking 2 years of university, commerce. I set up all the accounting systems for Bourgault Industries, the monthly financial reporting systems, and the cost accounting, working with my older brother. So where I'm going with this is over the course from 1969 to it was basically in 1977, I became a manager, the accountant of the company. And so I was in management positions for over the last 48 years. And what I learned in management helped prepare me for what I'm doing here. I learned how to build unity in a team. And it didn't come easy, all of us, my father, brothers, and I, and all the managers, as we were growing Bourgault Industries from a small startup manufacturing company incorporated in 1973, through the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s and on, I discovered that there are really important principles that if you follow them and you live those principles, there's no problems you can't solve. And the number one principle, and this is my number one principle, is my relationship with God. And nothing is above it. I don't seek power or money or anything above my relationship with God. That's number one. If we get our relationship right with God, everything will flow from that. If we're asking and listening for God's guidance, He'll guide us and help show us the way to solve all of our problems in win-win ways. God thinks win-win. He doesn't think win-lose. And so the second highest principle that I learned was love, the principle of love. And we know that as parents and grandparents, we would give our life in a heartbeat for our children and grandchildren. And so if we let that guide us, every moment, we will take back this country and we'll get it back on the right track for our children and grandchildren and future generation. And it'll be the love that guides us to do that. That's the second highest principle. So when we're guided by love, by God and by love, and I say it like this: God, love, truth, freedom, and justice. Because God loves truth, freedom, and justice. So the third highest value that I have is truth. And so I value truth above money and above power. So in other words, I'm not going to compromise for money or for power. I'm not going to compromise my relationship with God or love or truth. The truth, all those things are more important to me than things that as humans, we can make the error of placing power or money or sex or something above those principles. And let me be clear, I'm no saint. It's a daily work in progress as well. But what's important is that we have a vision and that we have core values and principles, and we do our best every day to live according to our vision and to our core values and principles. And if we do that, the odds of getting there are one heck of a lot better if we don't have it. So I like the way the great Chinese sage had put it this way. He had said, well, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And if you don't change direction, you may end up where you're headed. And so the fourth highest value, the third highest value, is the pursuit of truth. If we relentlessly pursue the truth on every issue, a great example of that is in the criminal justice system. If somebody's accused of having committed a crime, we don't just go grab them and hang them, right? That in the Wild West, that happened, right, on occasion. No, we have a justice system. And what we do is we do an investigation, we gather with an open mind, we gather the facts to discern the truth based on the facts, whether or not there's enough evidence to prove that that person committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And so you can take that analogy and apply it to every single thing in our lives. If we don't know the answer to something, Jesus teaches that in the Course in Miracles. If you don't know the answer to something, set the goal of truth. Keep an open mind. Stay on the fence and listen to what everybody has to say. Make sure that and as you do that, as you gather the facts, pretty soon you'll see the pieces of the puzzle will come together, and you'll be able to, based on the facts, using our God-given common sense deductive reasoning and logic, we can discern the truth of the matter. And whatever the truth is, then we act on that. And I've learned, having recovered from a life-threatening illness, when you do that, you're going to get the desired result. And so these are the principles that if we apply them to every problem we're facing as a country and working as a team, always in pursuit of truth, again, there is no problem in this country that we cannot solve. So the fourth highest principle is the principle of freedom and personal responsibility. We all know it's a self-evident truth. The American Declaration of Independence begins like this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and at the time means men and women, were created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so freedom is a gift to us from God. We're all given free will. We know that, we can see that. Kids prove that to us every day. I tell this story over and over again because it was such a good story. My daughter was 6 years old, Lise, Ryan's wife, and I wanted her to clean her room. And Lise was a very strong-willed person. Nobody told her what to do. And I asked her to clean her room, and she wouldn't clean her room. And I spanked her once in her life. And that was the time, and I swore to God I would never do that again. It was the worst thing I could have ever done. And so you see that even children have free will, and it's a God-given right, and nobody has a right to take that away from them. So freedom is my fourth highest core value and principle. I love freedom. And what goes with freedom, though, we know, is personal responsibility. Because every choice we make has a consequence, a natural consequence. And so it's really important that we teach our children these principles as well. You know, God gave you freedom, and you can choose, but be aware, there's a consequence to your choice. So make informed choices so that you get the desired result. And so the fifth highest principle is justice. You know, and if we follow these other principles, if we pursue truth, that's how we get justice in our justice system. Is right alongside justice is also fairness. You know, it's important that we're fair in every interaction we have in life, personal interactions. It's important that we look for the win-win, that we're fair to one another. And it's important that this in particular applies to our governments, that our governments are just and fair, and that our governments follow these principles. So these are the principles that I've learned to lead and manage by in our companies, in our manufacturing company. Over a period of years, we developed a vision, mission, core values, and principle statement. And it took a lot of work for us to debate this thing. It's a one-page document. And that's what I would like us, it's very similar to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter begins, whereas Canada was founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And all those principles that are in the Charter, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, all those principles that are in the Charter, those were self-evident truths given to us by our Creator. They were written down by men who were spiritual men or religious or spiritual, and who cared about creating a just society and based on universal truths and principles. And so it's really important, elected the leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister of the country, one of the number one things I would be doing is upholding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Bill of Rights, and the Criminal Code of Canada, because all of them have been trampled on over the last 2.5 years.
Here.
You know, about almost 2 years ago, one of the guys that I heard in Saskatchewan speaking loudly about the charter is here tonight. Mark Friesen was one of the first ones. I would attend rallies where Mark would speak, and I always valued and appreciated the courage that Mark got out there to educate Canadians, to help them to be aware of the charter rights and freedoms, and to stand up for their rights. So thank you for that, Mark. So with those principles in mind, those are the values and principles that under my leadership, the administration of, assuming I'm elected leader of the Conservative Party, and the Prime Minister of Canada, the people that would be serving in my administration would all be MPs, and of course there are other appointments. All the people that would be appointed would have to abide by these principles. Every policy, every legislative policy that is in government, in the federal government, would have to be screened through these principles. Does this policy fit that God, love, truth, freedom, and justice, fairness, and personal responsibility? Does it fit? And if it doesn't, we change the legislation or we get rid of it altogether.
Here.
The number one goal of a prime minister and those that make up the government, the cabinet, and that includes the civil service, our number one goal is to serve the Canadian people, not to serve any other organizations, not corporations, not the UN, not the World Economic Forum, not the World Health Organization. I have no affiliation whatsoever with any of those organizations, and what I've observed and learned about them, I think that they're in need of a tremendous overhaul. And so until they overhaul, my government is going to be encouraging them to overhaul, and if they don't, we're going to keep them at arm's length. We don't want to be controlled. I do not want to see the Canadian people being controlled by unelected organizations outside of our country.
Here.
I want to see the restoration of the rights, the God-given rights and freedoms of all Canadians, so that you can fulfill your dreams, so that you can live your life without being hassled by the federal government. One of the objectives would also be to eliminate corruption in government. And so how do we do that? The way we would do it is I would be surrounding, one person cannot take on the position of Prime Minister without a really great team of like-minded, honest, truth-seeking, principled, fiscal and social conservative. And so I can tell you, I'm going to fill the government of Canada with these types of people. One of the really important things that I've been working on for 40 years now, like Theo said, when I was in my mid-20s, I had these insights, desire, and it was a strong desire. I was observing Pierre Trudeau and the way he was governing our country and the way he was taxing and spending. And here I got to do a confession with you folks. I voted in 1974 for the Liberals.
Ooh.
So the way Winston Churchill, what gave me some consolation is the way Winston Churchill had put it. He said, if you don't vote Liberal before the age of 30, you don't have a heart. If you don't vote Conservative by after the age of 30, you don't have a brain. So, any liberals in the room, I say it tongue in cheek. I suspect that in Ottawa, I might get a slightly different response.
I think you're right about that, yeah.
So when I was in my mid-20s, I could see, well, early 20s actually, 1976, I voted conservative after that. Ever since, I've been a conservative. And why was I conservative? You know, well, I believed in the philosophy of freedom. I believed in the philosophy of low taxes, minimum government interference. Those were some of the big ones. I was a believer, and the Conservative Party traditionally was not afraid to talk about God. The Conservative Party was pro-life. I'm pro-life. Yeah. So that's kind of why I was always leaned heavily and voted conservative all my life. And I never missed a vote. I felt I had a responsibility to vote. So, but what was happening in the mid-1970s to make me want to become Prime Minister someday was that Pierre Trudeau was taxing and spending like there was no tomorrow. And I researched and wrote one of my manuscripts in 2018, 2019, and I did the numbers. And Pierre Trudeau, over the 16 years he was in power, from 68 to 84, he added $500 billion, $500 billion to our national debt in 2019 dollars. He drove inflation to 13% by the early 1980s, late 70s. Inflation in Canada was 13%. And Paul Volcker, the Fed chairman in the United States, he raised interest rates, and many of us will remember interest rates were at 22%. And people lost businesses, lost land, farmland, and so that doesn't work. To be a tax and spend liberal, that does not work. Everybody has to balance their budget, including the federal government. So back then, I began to strategize. I began to ask the question, why are people voting for tax and spend liberals? At the time, I really didn't have the answer. But over the years, as a result of a life-altering experience, I began to piece this together. In 1984, I developed severe chronic fatigue. And then it progressively worsened. I continued to work until 1991. By 1991, I had developed severe chronic headaches, neuromuscular problems, and with the severe chronic headaches, I could not sleep. No painkiller could touch them. And so I went a year and a half without any sleep. I was awake all the time. Yeah, but in 1991, I learned to meditate. And what I learned is prayer is when you talk to God, and meditation is when you listen. And when I would meditate morning and night and during the day, I learned transcendental meditation, which within 2 years led to breath meditation. And I've been meditating ever since. And in the Bible it says, be still and know I'm God. That's what you're doing. And we all have different forms of that. And maybe that's why our truckers have played such a huge role. I heard somebody say that. Because when you're driving, for me, before I learned transcendental meditation and breath meditation, the way I would feel to get close to God is I would go for long drives or go for long walks to the lake, to St. Brew, or in nature. So there's various forms of meditation. And so in order to, I had spent from 1984 to 92, I spent those 8 years in a conventional medical care system at the best medical care centers in North America. And in those 8 years, 3 times to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, which in my research was ranked the #1 medical care center in North America. I was there 3 times over 5 years for three days of testing each time, 3 full days of testing. And never could they give me a single clue as to what was causing my health problems. So by 1992, I'd been in and out of hospitals, 91 and into 92. And I realized that unless I figured out what was going on, what was causing this, I did not have long to live. My children couldn't live in the house. I couldn't have any noise in the house. And it broke the relationship with my wife at the time. And so I made the decision to apply my research skills, which I developed over a period of years. I'm a self-taught inventor, mechanical engineer. I developed and patented a number of Bourgault products and Bourgault tillage tools products. And by the grace of God, I walked into a health food store in Saskatoon, and I picked up an Alive magazine, and I read an article about a lady who had had her mercury amalgam dental fillings removed and fully recovered from chronic fatigue. I jumped off my bed as if jumping, I couldn't really jump, but I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. I went and counted in my mouth. I had 16 large mercury amalgam dental fillings in my mouth. So over the course of the next year, I researched and read and researched 5 books and numerous articles, and I had all the symptoms of mercury poisoning. And I found who I felt was the world's leading researcher, Dr. Hal Huggins in Colorado Springs. He had written the book, It's All in Your Head. So I phoned him in June of 1993, and in July, August, I was in his clinic, a special clinic, specially designed to be able to safely remove and replace amalgams, mercury amalgam dental fillings, with composites that he had worked to develop with companies that developed the new composite dental materials that were much less toxic, and some of them are now completely non-toxic materials, but just as tough as our teeth. And so when he did that, I began to recover immediately. The next 2 years, I was so ill at the time, I knew that I would have to continue. I'd have to detoxify the mercury, and so I studied. And by 1995, I had regained enough health that I was able to open the LifeWise Health Center in St. Brew, a health food store, where we would share information that we had gathered over the life of my health challenges with people, and I helped people recover from all kinds of health problems, including mercury poisoning, a lady that had systemic lupus, for example, and she was deathly ill. She had it removed and she recovered. She's still doing well to this day. And so I studied ever since then, 92, I've studied natural health and healing, and I became quite knowledgeable because to me, what I've learned, the whole idea of gathering knowledge isn't to have knowledge over people. It's to share what you learn, at least if people are open to it, to share what you've learned from your experience and your studies with others, to have power with others, not to have power over others. God doesn't want us to lord myself over anybody else. That's not the God I know. He wants me to help others to be healthy and to be happy and to be prosperous. And that's the vision that I have for this country. I want to empower and enable all Canadians to be healthy, to be happy and prosperous, and to work to fulfill their own God-given dreams. And so how do we do that? Well, this is in 1998. I had been eating an all-organic food diet as one of the strategies to regain excellent health. I had, my family and I began eating 100% organic food diet. And what I saw happen to my children especially was miraculous. Colds and flus were a thing of the past. They were never sick. Our son went from being a C+ student to an A student. At the time, he was struggling with his weight. That disappeared. He had issues with bedwetting. That disappeared. And he was voted top athlete in the school. All that within a year. So I saw what a healthy diet and lifestyle does. And then through the health food store, continue to share that information. Same results with other people doing the same thing. So that's when I learned that the key to health is having a strong, healthy immune system. And we do that by the quality of what we're eating, drinking, and breathing. And the purer, the better the quality, the better our health is going to be. And then, according to nature, if you have a strong immune system, unwanted bacteria, viruses, funguses, and parasites, they don't get past your immune system. So you can be exposed to viruses like COVID-19. I didn't have any issues with COVID-19. And I know why. And there are also excellent supplements like Immunophase and Bronchophase that we had in our health food store that we shared with people in January, February, March, April, began sharing that so that people would know how to prevent and treat COVID-19. I assisted 29 people with the knowledge that I had just by sharing this information with them to help them prevent and have speedy recoveries from COVID-19. 2 of those people were in the hospital. One guy had been in the hospital for 25 days on oxygen. And within 3 days of taking quercetin and zinc and vitamin D, he was transferred out of Royal University Hospital back to Nipawin. 2 days in Nipawin and out, and he had full recovery. So, what I discovered in that period, 95 to 98, in 1998, I realized the reason that people were not able to afford a healthy diet and lifestyle is because we're taxing people when they're living below the poverty line. So I researched and wrote a book that I titled Why Lower Taxes for All Canadians. And what I uncovered was that the net disposable income required for a single adult to live at the true poverty line in 1999 was $25,000. I updated that budget, and today in 2018-19, when I researched and wrote a manuscript I titled The Way of Truth, the best ways to eliminate poverty, sickness and disease, depression, suicides, crime, and how to create a healthy, happy, and prosperous society. What I found in that budget when I updated it is, in Saskatchewan, it's $45,000 for a single adult to live at the true poverty line. And yet, here in Canada, when you earn $11,800 federally, you start paying 15% federal tax. And in Saskatchewan, it's $16,000. You start paying 10.5% tax on every dollar over and above that. Well, we don't tax a business before it's profitable. Why are we taxing our citizens before they're profitable? And what does that do when we do that? Well, what it does is one of the only places that people can cut in their budget is their food budget. So they end up eating macaroni and cheese, very unhealthy diet and lifestyle because they're living below the poverty line. There's no joy, no entertainment in their lives. They can't afford, and that budget of $45,000, that's with no luxuries whatsoever. That's not eating at restaurants. That's not going to movies. That's not buying Christmas presents and birthday presents. It's just the bare bones poverty line. And I calculate the average right now across the country is $50,000. And so I want to treat Canadians, what I care most about is I care about you guys. I care about Canadians. I care about our kids. And I want to make sure that all of you can afford a healthy diet and lifestyle. And so how are we going to do that? We're going to, what I'm proposing, and I will be doing my best to sell the Conservative Party on this, and all Canadians, and with your help, they'll see that it's the right thing to do, because it's pure math. It's simply mathematical. And the statistics show that as people's incomes rise, so does their health improve. So guess what's going to happen if we do this? Yeah, we're going to lose some tax revenues, but where's all the money going right now? People say, well, where's the money going to come to pay for these $70 billion in tax reductions? It would be about 15 billion a year over 4 years. I propose that we raise the basic standard, basic personal exemption to 50,000 over a 4-year period. And where's the money going to come from? It's going to come out of the medical care system.
Healthcare, yeah.
That's where it's going right now.
Absolutely, yeah, you're right.
And the language that I use here is not healthcare, because true healthcare is your diet, it's our own diet lifestyle choices. Nobody can make our diet lifestyle choices for us but ourselves. So we have to empower. I want to empower Canadians to understand that it's our own diet lifestyle choices that's going to determine whether we're going to end up in the medical care system. I want to empower you financially so that you can afford a healthy diet and lifestyle. And
Sorry.
so that's called financial freedom. And what goes with that is personal responsibility.
Yep.
So as well, we would work, the education system must be reformed to help people understand this stuff. I mean, God, you go through 12 years in a university, we should be able to understand what a healthy diet and lifestyle looks like. I can give it to you in a day. So we've increased the basic personal exemption level to 50,000, and we would allow income splitting up to 100,000 for a married couple.
That's how I'm saying.
And a $20,000 personal deduction per child. Because over the life of a child, you're going to have to save in the early years. If there's any room in your budget, you're going to have to save, because as children get older, it costs more as they get into sports and as they eat more. You can spend $10,000 easily on an organic food diet for a hungry child, $10,000 to $12,000 a year. So it's critical that parents be able to afford to have children and to raise healthy and happy children.
Yeah.
And again, this is all just mathematics. It's just, I can show you the budgets. Many of you have likely done the budgets. And so I want to make sure that every Canadian has in their budget that they can afford rent, have a clunker vehicle so they can get to and from work. And that's all that's in that budget. There's no luxuries in there. And so that you can also afford a healthy diet and lifestyle. Once people would reach the true poverty line, or where they would be profitable, like a business, then you start to pay a flat tax. 25%, 15% to the federal government, 10% to the provincial government. I would work with the premiers. I would shame them until they changed the tax system. If they resisted allowing Canadians to afford a healthy diet and lifestyle, I would keep their feet to the fire, and I'd ask you to help me to do it as well. So 25% flat tax between $50,000 and $1 million, $50,000 and $1 million, 25% flat tax. And that way you could submit your income on a piece of paper this size. Why complicate things, right? We all have to pay some taxes for essential government services. So let's make it a fair flat tax so that people won't jump into tax evasion techniques to get away from paying tax. We all have to pay our fair share. So if you're earning $1 million a year, you should pay $250,000 to your federal, provincial governments so that we can fund our military and essential services like that. Over $1 million, we would have a flat tax again. From $1 million to $100 million, a flat tax of 30%. From $100 million to $1 billion, be a 35% flat tax. And over $1 billion, we take 100% of your earnings, because you guys are the problem in the world right now. I say that tongue in cheek, Bill. We'd only take 50% of your income, Bill Gates. So the other part of the tax system that I would want to see reformed so that Canada could compete in the world Because I mean, the idea that we're an island and we can just do whatever we want here and make businesses uncompetitive here, well, I guess if you're Justin Trudeau, that maybe makes sense, but to nobody else in this country does it make sense. I know from having run and grown businesses over the years, and business people will relate to this, a minimum of 75% of our net income in our businesses is plowed right back into the business to continue to grow the business, to invest in maintenance, to invest in research and development, and to help the company to grow. So if you don't reinvest that capital, your company's not going to grow. It's not going to do well. You're not going to be able to employ people. And so what I want to see for businesses, I want to see for small businesses, I'd like to see earnings up to $1 million once you're profitable, a 10% tax. And for over $1 million in earnings, you'd pay a 21% tax for businesses. And that would be competitive with the United States, because we're competing with the United States. And it would help us to be more competitive with China. The average wage of someone in China, I checked in 2019, is $7 an hour. Well, you can't survive on that. In Canada, our average salary is much higher than that. And I don't see that, I think there can be a minimum wage. I don't struggle with that too much, but if you keep increasing the minimum wage, it makes it more difficult for employers to hire you. I think the best way to eliminate poverty, to me, it's obvious. Stop taxing people when they're living below the poverty line. The politicians like to sucker Canadians into thinking that, oh, let's raise the minimum wage. But whose wage do they really want to raise? It's their own. So I don't struggle with having a bare bones minimum wage, but I think the best way to help low-income people is to stop taxing people and to get the economy rocking and rolling. And the way we get the economy rocking and rolling is with fair taxes, both for individuals and for businesses. And with the tax reforms, I can tell you, there would be a lot of people at Canada Revenue Agency looking for jobs.
McDonald's is hiring.
What's that?
I said McDonald's is hiring.
Yeah, McDonald's is hiring now. I've heard so many stories of Revenue Canada hassling people. And so we really need to simplify our tax system. And I'll tell you, under my leadership, Revenue Canada would not be abusing people. Revenue Canada would have to be run with the same principles that I spoke to you about: God, love, truth, freedom, and justice. There's got to be fairness when we're dealing with tax issues and finding win-win solutions if somebody's in a financially difficult situation. I've had dealings with Revenue Canada, especially in the last 7 years. It's not like they've come after me personally or anything like that, but I've seen when the Trudeau government decided to cut $1 billion out of the research and development tax credits, which is a good program. It encourages companies to do research and development. It gives tax credits. And they made a decision. I could tell they walked in with their mind made up and they were going to cut. So the other thing that we would do, one of the first things we would do, obviously, in government is we'd get rid of all mandates. They would be gone. To me, mandates, they use the word mandate, but that's really a cover for extortion. Section 3461 in the criminal code. You read extortion, that's all it is. It's either you do this, you take this experimental injection that can kill you or injure you, or you're going to lose your job. If you read the definition of extortion, that's what it is. And so all the mandates would be gone. We did the research immediately when they put out the mask mandates. I knew, as president of my company, understanding the OSHA occupational health and safety regulations, I could not put an employee in an environment where the level of oxygen was below 19.5%. I couldn't put in an employee where the level of carbon dioxide was above 1,000 parts per million. And so I hired an expert out of Edmonton, Chris Schaefer. Many of you may know him. He's been on the speaking trail educating people. And we put, he brought his oxygen and CO2 meter, and we put 4 different types of masks on people. And we measured the level of carbon dioxide and oxygen behind those masks. And the average was, the average level of oxygen was 17 to 17.5%. In other words, immediately dangerous to life and health. The level of carbon dioxide was between 25 and 43 parts per million. 5,000 parts per million is hazardous. Over 40,000 can stop your heart, because carbon dioxide is 1.5 times heavier than oxygen. So if you fill your lungs with carbon dioxide, you can't get any oxygen in. And it's a lower level of oxygen. And I'm aware of many cases where people passed out and were injured as a result. So the other thing is, you know, if we want to keep mosquitoes in our house, out of our house, we make sure that the screen is smaller than the mosquito. If the screen is 3 times bigger than the mosquito, it's not going to do a very good job of keeping the mosquitoes out. And so as far as a mask keeping viral particles that are 3 times smaller than an N95 mask that filters at 0.3 microns, the virus at 0.1, how's that going to work? You know, there's no science behind what they're doing. None at all. And so one of the things that I would be doing as Prime Minister and my administration, we would have a team of scientists and doctors. We got one of them right here, right now, that has spoken out loudly about all the lies. Dr. Roger Hopkins. So, Dr. Tam, you're fired.
Yes, no.
And it's up to you guys to say to Justin, you're fired too.
Yeah.
You'll be on the Justice Committee.
Lock them up.
Lock 'em up, yeah.
So, yeah, so when the COVID-19 situation hit in January, I immediately knew that we had supplements that would prevent and treat COVID. Again, mark this down. Everybody should have this in their cupboards in case you get struck by a virus. Immunophase and bronchophase, and quercetin, zinc, and vitamin D. Many of you are probably already doing it, but just keep it in your cupboard if ever you feel a viral infection coming on. They work excellent. So I knew about this in early January, February, March, and April. Dr. Joseph Mercola had published the article on quercetin and how quercetin did the same thing as hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. It acts as an ionophore to shuttle the zinc into our cells, because zinc has difficulty getting into our cells. And what the zinc does, the mineral zinc, it interferes with our polymerase enzyme, which the virus is required to be able to replicate. So that's why they work so well. And Dr. Mercola explained that in that article. And so we began pumping that information out to as many people as we could. We formed a nonprofit organization. We called it, we named it Canadians for Truth, Freedom, and Justice in the summer and fall of 2020. And we began publishing, we produced brochures, and we built a website. Ryan was instrumental here in assisting with that. We built a great website, Canadians for Truth. You can still go there and see it, canadiansfortruth.net. And we began sharing information on face masks and how to prevent and treat COVID-19. And we also got involved in helping parents to be educated. We had a situation where a mother wanted to protect her daughter from her daughter, who was 12, did not want to take an experimental gene therapy, and her mother supported her. And so I was connecting with honest, truth-seeking doctors like Dr. Roger Hodkinson and Dr. Chosey and others across the country, and working with one lone warrior, brave lawyer in Saskatchewan. We helped put together a lawsuit to protect this young girl so she wouldn't be forced to take an experimental injection. And to this day, she hasn't. All my life, I've had a sense of justice. I wasn't a fighter like Theo on the ice, but when I played junior hockey, I wasn't the biggest guy out there, but if somebody was picking on my teammates, it was the biggest mistake they ever made, because right is might. And I can't stand seeing people being abused or picked on, and that's how my parents were. And so, so what happened then, when the Freedom Convoy came along, it was heading out, I was hearing about it, and I was asked by a few people if I was going, and one of them made it clear to me that we were going. My fiance said, we're going, and so we decided we had to go. She's a freedom fighter. Sherry's a freedom fighter as well, and so when Pastor Perry called me that day, we were on Central Avenue, driving up Central Avenue in Prince Albert, and Pastor Perry says, Joe, I want to go to Ottawa with you. And Sherry says, we're going. So that was it. We were going. So we picked up a professional videographer that we had with us, and he filmed the whole trip out there, and we interviewed truckers along the way. And when we got to Regina, got to Ottawa, he filmed more. But when we got to Ottawa, we could see right away that the truckers required assistance to be organized. We wanted to make sure that it remained a legal, peaceful protest. So myself and the general manager here of Bourgault Tillage Tools, Ryan, I flew him in because he's got excellent leadership skills. And we worked together with the truckers to organize them, to help set up steering committees so that they could work together, organized in an organized fashion, and work with the Ottawa Police and the City of Ottawa. And so I was there the whole time. We were witnessing this, and this was an extremely legal, peaceful protest. The truckers were great guys to work with, very common sense, down-to-earth people, natural leadership skills, and they worked together to make sure that they were accommodating the citizens of Ottawa, and the traffic lanes were opened up. I mean, they got their attention with horns, but to say that people were traumatized because of horns, I never missed a beat sleeping when the horns were blowing. So I don't know where they get the trauma from about horns going off, but, and what's that?
Earplugs.
Earplugs, yeah, that's all they would have to do is put on earplugs. Simple solution, exactly.
It's the sound of freedom.
Yeah, it was the sound of freedom, exactly.
Who couldn't sleep to that?
And I mean, truckers got letters. I didn't bring one tonight, I forgot to do it. I read one the other night. The letters that the truckers were getting from the citizens of Ottawa and Canadians coming. I mean, you couldn't stop crying by the time you got to the end of a letter. It just thousands and thousands of these letters.
I still get them every day.
Yeah, it was amazing. So, so that was my experience with going to Ottawa. It was I could go on about that experience, but it was probably the most spiritual experience, emotional experience of my life. Driving there, as thousands of Canadians were expressing their love of country and the feeling that they're finally, again, proud of their country, how the truckers unified Canadians around freedom and pride in their country. So as we were driving back from Ottawa, we left on the 16th. 2 days after, two or 3 days after they declared that the peaceful protesters were winning the war on truth, freedom, and justice. And so they decided they had to put an end to it by really lying and deceiving and twisting the truth in the way they described what was going on over there. It was unbelievable to listen to that press conference. Man, that was unbelievable to listen to that. Unbelievable. And so on the way back home, we left on the Wednesday, the 16th, I think, and we discussed driving back to Ottawa, where this would go from there. And well, I had given serious thought in previous leadership elections for the Conservative Party of running for the leadership, and Ryan was encouraging me to run, and I had other friends that called me and said, "We need a leader, Joe, and we want you to run." And so, after 3 weeks of really discussion and prayer, I was praying. I wanted to make sure that I was doing it for the right reasons. I decided to make a bid for the leadership of the Conservative Party. So with that, what's going to go out the window? It wasn't hard to put the platform together, the legislative agenda, get rid of the mandates. We're going to end the carbon taxes. And I can tell you as a manufacturer, I can explain why the carbon taxes have to go. And the simple answer is this. When you make Canadian businesses uncompetitive with the United States and with China, what happens to our jobs? They go to China. And China produces over 60% of their electricity is coal-fired electricity, and it's not nearly as clean as the coal-fired electricity we produce here in Canada, and only 9% of our electricity in Canada is produced by coal-fired power plants, and amongst the cleanest burning coal-fired plants in the world. So Justin just doesn't get it. You're not going to reduce global emissions and pollution by shipping our jobs to China, where they pollute at a far higher rate than we do here in Canada. And that's why one of the big reasons why carbon taxes have to go, because they do not work to achieve what they're trying to achieve. And of course, probably, maybe more importantly, that's the justification to help environmentally conscious Canadians to understand why carbon taxes don't work. But the more important one is for Canadians. Like, we've driven up the cost of heating their homes, driving their vehicles, like fossil fuels and gasoline to get to work and diesel to run your tractors and plant your crops. And those are not luxuries. They're essentials, part of our economy. And so the inflation rate that we're seeing now is one of the primary drivers of inflation are these taxes. And so that's why the carbon taxes would go immediately. And I know the Conservative Party is very supportive of that. The other thing that would not happen in our government, there would be no digital IDs. I'm 100% opposed to digital IDs. And I'm also 100% opposed to programmable digital currencies by our central bank. There's no way that our government should be able to, at the flick of a switch, turn off your bank account just because you sent $30 to a worthy cause that you deem worthy. I mean, who the hell do they think they are, that they can control our lives like that?
Yeah.
So, with the carbon taxes gone, we would of course be supporting all industries, and including the energy industry, because I believe the more profitable that any industry is, the more they can take some of those profits and invest it in research and development to continue to develop clean energy technologies and clean technologies to reduce and eliminate and stop the pollution of our environment.
He said the pollution is in Ottawa, not in
Yeah.
Ottawa. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's not, yeah, I would use a different word. I would describe it as corruption. Yeah. So just one last thing here, that what would have happened differently with what I understood, and you probably gathered that, in January, February, March, April, when the COVID situation hit, we would have had a panel of scientists and doctors from Canada, honest, truth-seeking people reviewing all the science. And those of us that were doing it, we quickly arrived at the conclusion that there were effective therapeutics. And so I would have allowed all the doctors to prescribe therapeutics. And there would have been no lockdown. And with no lockdowns, we would have not added $400 billion to our national debt. And so this gives you an idea of some of the policies and the core values and principles that we would be leading and guiding our governments on. So with that in mind, again, I want to thank you all for coming. You know, I want to say, God help us to keep our land glorious and free. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. So we are going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to have Dr. Hodkinson. He's going to come and talk for 15 or so minutes, and then we'll allow everyone to ask some questions as well. So 5-minute break. Oh yeah, get your $20 out for the jersey. I thought Joe was going to knock that over about 50 times. I was going to come up and move it. So 5 minutes, come on back in and we'll start the program up again. Thank you.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Yeah, where'd you come up from then?
Saskatoon.
It's good you might catch you on the same trip then.
Yeah.
Okay, the intermission is actually 20 minutes.
Oh, I'm going to shut this off, guys. Intermission is 20 minutes. I'll be back.
20 minutes.